Hello, welcome to the first year BTech course of Guru Nanak Institute of Technology. I'm Dr. Indrajit Bose and I shall be your course instructor for this session. This paper is entitled English with the paper code of HU101. In this paper, I shall be guiding you in the basic forms, genres, and modes of communication, and we shall be looking at examples from a globalized context as we go along. This is module 2 of the paper and is called Functional Grammar. Throughout the lectures in this module, I have been endeavoring to familiarize you with the key concepts of basic English grammar and its uses in everyday life and the workplace. This is lecture 10 in the series on Common Errors in English, part 2. In the first part of this lecture, we looked at what are the different ways in which the absence of grammatical correctness can compromise communication in the everyday world and also in the workplace world. In this second and final part of the closing lecture in this module, I shall be looking at the ways of correcting these errors and what is the advisability at all of correcting, if that is possible or not. So we shall look at how far it is possible to correct, the how and the whys of correcting. There shall be a student's guide to correction as well as a professional's guide to correction. I shall also talk briefly about dealing with errors, finding the remedy, and I shall also attempt to sketch in or to indicate the way to the future or towards good grammar. So let us begin by looking at the hows and whys of correcting. Now, the first question that comes to mind or that arises is this debate of whether to correct or not to correct. This is supposed to be the age of self-sufficiency and of autonomous learning. We are all learning new things on our own. In such a situation, the pointing out of errors is regarded really as damaging to one's self-esteem. Now, I shall be talking about both the worlds, the world of the student in the sphere of education and also the world of the professional in the workplace. In both these cases, the pointing out of errors is regarded as somewhat detrimental or damaging to one's self-esteem. Of course, it is the responsibility of the teacher to point out where the student is going wrong. As far as the young professional in the workplace is concerned, it is far more likely that the professional will find a situation far more non-compromising than the student as far as the tolerance of grammatical errors of different kinds is concerned. So it is actually imperative for the professional to find out the sources of these errors by himself or herself and to make the necessary changes that are required. Because otherwise, there is likely to be mostly a zero tolerance of such errors in the workplace world. Again, as far as the pointing out of these errors is concerned, it has been observed that unless there is proper self-realization on the part of the person who is making these errors, changes can hardly take place. So both for the student as well as for the beginner professional, guided learning or self-discovery of the errors and self-correction is really the best approach. Now we have seen that there are different kinds of errors and that some errors are so fossilized and deeply ingrained that it is difficult to eradicate them. This might be true for the student as well as the professional. But facing the situation that the professional faces, the industry, it is even more imperative perhaps that these kinds of errors are removed. So if necessary, the professional might have to undergo a course of rigorous training or additional training or classes in order to rectify these errors, even if they are fossilized ones. Now, errors which seriously interfere with the communication of meaning obviously need immediate attention, and they should be dealt with in that manner. Uh, the learner will have to be introduced to the whole process. Now, by the learner, I mean, of course, the learner in the world of education, as well as the young professional who also is a kind of learner. Now, the learner as well as the young professional, they both have to be introduced to this entire process of cumulative correction, repeated self-correction, and editing, re-editing in order to produce a document or to produce oral communication of uncompromisingly high quality. Now, what about this student's guide to accuracy or to correction that I was talking about? Is there anything like a handy student survival kit? There may not be possibly something ready-made, but it is possible to assemble together such a kit or to assemble together certain things which would be helpful for the student. Now, I'm talking mostly about writing as far as the student as well as the professional are concerned. So, in that case, in order to minimize errors in writing, certain references can be kept handy. For example, a good dictionary and a CD-ROM. A student would do well to keep either a dictionary like the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary or the Cambridge Advanced Learners Dictionary handy. There is also the CD-ROM, which can be installed onto the system. There are also apps to these dictionaries, which are now available and can be downloaded from Google Play Store in one's smartphone. So please keep these resources handy so that you can look them up at any point of time. A good thesaurus, Roget's thesaurus is the standard, of course. So you keep that or keep a soft copy of it in your system. A grammar handbook or a book of grammatical rules, really, it would be most helpful to have one. Of course, if you're in great difficulties, you can refer to the teacher or course instructor, either in person or by email or some other means. There are also online options, grammar checkers, just like spell checkers, which function online. So you can take recourse to these options at some point of time or the other. But it is best to keep and to refer back to the handbook, the dictionary, and the thesaurus. Also, what is important is, as a learner, somebody who is trying to improve upon his or her own processes of communication, you should keep a strict tab on your own errors and see that these errors are not repeated. So possibly maintaining a diary or a notebook of errors would be called for. So you can improve upon your own performance in this kind of way. Obviously, it is a very systematic way, and you need to update this diary or journal at every point of time whenever you are making these errors and whenever you are correcting them. So these are a few pointers which can serve as a guide for the student. What about the professional? The professional also needs to be error-free. In fact, a much greater awareness about the errors is required because, after all, the professional is writing in the public domain. All the company correspondence, the online communication, emails, the website content that is uploaded, the social media content, all that is in the public domain and can be accessed by anybody and everybody. So if there are errors, then this would imply some kind of negative publicity for the organization. So the professional rather has to use certain resources and keep certain resources handy. Again, this can be a kind of reference guide. Keep the dictionary or the online dictionary handy or install the app on one's mobile phone. I would say the hard copy of the dictionary would be useful, but in case it's difficult to find the space in one's workstation to keep that, or one doesn't have really the time to refer to it, Just having the app or looking at the online version of the dictionary on one's smartphone would be sufficient. Also, a usage or style guide can be kept handy. There are different online tools and resources, grammar checkers, spell checkers, various other resources. One can refer to them from time to time. Also, what is useful is that in order not to waste too much of time on proofreading and correcting for errors, one can keep customizable templates and copies of documents which are frequently required ready and serviceable at one's fingertips, rather. So you would need to edit less because it is a corrected version. You just need to make some changes to that to fit in the present document which you are submitting. So keep the things ready and corrected already. Of course, that doesn't mean that you don't have to go through it once more at the very end before you submit. Certainly, you need to do that, but the necessity for repeated revision may not be there. So keep the formats, templates, and uh, samples ready with you. Don't click on send before reading a document once and thoroughly. Only if you have read it thoroughly and you have checked it more than once and you find that it is okay, do you send it across or do you mail it across? The next stage or the next thing to consider is how is one then to deal with the errors. Now, obviously, there are different types of errors. For tense errors, one can draw timelines and plot the events over there. As far as the use of prepositions is concerned, remember that you always indicate the relationship of the noun or phrase to something else. It will be preceded by the subject and the verb, not followed by it. Look at the examples given below here. The wedding was held on the church. Well, this is wrong. It cannot be held on the church. The wedding was held at the church. Preposition place. But notice that I can also represent something like this. The wedding was held on the church premises. If I say that, that would be correct. But if I say the wedding was held on the church, it is not correct. Again, dangling modifiers, a repeated problem. The solution to that would be to closing them up to tighten the construction. The manager was waiting, delayed by the tardy employees. This doesn't make sense. It's very, very confusing. So the manager, delayed by the tardy employees, was waiting. This makes better sense. I have redrafted it to make it a tighter construction. So deal with dangling modifiers by tightening them up. For concord errors, learn about the verbs because mostly it's the singular or plural forms of the verbs that we need to know. So if you're not sure about the verbs, keep a list of the singular and plural forms of the verbs handy with you. Keep a soft copy so that you can quickly look it up. Use appropriate pronouns and conjunctions. Again, follow the norms of usage. Also, keep a brief record of the corrections that you have made. Always try to edit the soft copy because it is much easier to correct the soft copy. For important documents, correct the hard copy once before the final submission. So obviously for important documents, you need to make the hard copy and to correct it once. That is the foolproof way of proceeding with hard copy documents or proceeding with documents which are important before final submission. Remember, hiding or concealing errors will ultimately prove to be counterproductive. It will be damaging for you as well for your organization. You might be called to account for it, and then you will not find that there is anything to defend yourself. You will find it difficult, rather, to defend yourself. So, if necessary, get help on correcting errors, get professional help if required, undergo training, rectify the errors, correct, practice, practice, practice. So, what is the remedy ultimately? The best remedy is to know about the correct forms and the norms of usage and to self-correct or to correct oneself. Grammatical errors usually create a lack of clarity, ambiguity in meaning. So the way out would be to cultivate a clear and logical outlook. Grammar is very, very scientific, and this is something which should not be forgotten. Conciseness and clarity of ideas and expressions needs to be cultivated. Also, internalize the rules as far as is practicable. And finally, put in extended practice in situational contexts. So, what is the ultimate solution, or wherein lies the road to the future? Is it in more flexibility, less emphasis on rules and strictures of grammar? So we tend to say that, oh, the grammatical rules are so frustrating, they are so confusing, they are so strict, it's very difficult to stick with them. More emphasis should be on communicative competence to make communication more free, more flexible. However, the fact remains that error-prone communication or erroneous communication is not to be condoned, and international standards cannot ever be compromised in this way. So the solution ultimately lies in grammarliness rather than grammarlessness. So learn more of grammar, find out more about grammar, grammatical forms, structures, meanings, and usages, practice them, perfect them, and put them to use. This is the best advice and most timely advice which can be given for the student as well as the working professional. So I hope that my brief pointers on the ways of correcting errors and grammatical errors of different kinds will be of some use to you. This brings us to the end of this final lecture in the series on the topic functional grammar, the module functional grammar. So this is the last part of the lecture, and we have seen how we can actually correct these common errors through trial and effort and acquiring more training and rigorous self-correction. So this brings us to the end of the lecture. Thank you.